The iPhone 5S is an interesting piece in Apple's history. It was released in 2013 and was the first iPhone completely handled under Tim Cook's regime, with Steve Jobs having passed on. While the iPhone 5S was disregarded by most as simply an S upgrade, in reality, it pushed the capabilities of not only iPhones, but smartphones in general, and really was a game changer, even if it wasn't obvious at the time. Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and today we're going to be talking about how the iPhone 5S brought subtle innovation and was able to make a real lasting impact on the smartphone market.
iPhone 5S. The 5S is the most forward-thinking phone we've ever created. In fact, perhaps the most forward-thinking phone anyone has ever made.
Forward thinking. That was Apple's tagline for the iPhone 5S when it was released over 5 years ago already. The 5S was supposed to be the most forward-thinking iPhone ever, with a focus on the future instead of the present. This tagline defined the 5S at launch and has kept the phone relevant even to today in 2018. Even if the 5S was overlooked by many in 2013 as just another iPhone 5 and too small of a phone to be good, it pushed technology forward in multiple ways that have massively helped us get to the point that we're at today. The iPhone 5S was extremely innovative, but subtly so, and here's why.
Touch ID uses a key you have with you everywhere you go, your finger. And more specifically, your fingerprint, which is unique to each of us.
At the original release of the iPhone 5S, there were a few big name features being talked about. The first and easily biggest was Touch ID, and fair enough, Touch ID was a big deal. Finally, there was an easier way to keep your phone secure that didn't require you to type in a passcode after every unlock. Touch ID was the first reliable fingerprint sensor that was actually well implemented, and it quickly resulted in every other phone manufacturer moving over to it. It was practical, easy, and made sense. What do you use to turn on your phone? Your finger. What's something completely unique to each individual? Their fingerprint. It just made sense, and Apple made the right choice by bringing it in. Of course, now we have Face ID, but Touch ID still set the industry standard for smartphone security that has mostly been upheld to today. Touch ID was important and forward-thinking.
But for most of us, we just want to take a picture and have the iPhone take a better picture for us. And we have some huge advancements in technology with iPhone 5S to do just that.
Next, we have the iPhone 5S's camera. While it still had 8 megapixels, which was the same as the iPhone 5 and 4S, it did still have some nice improvements like automatic image stabilization and the dual LED True Tone flash. There is a visible improvement in photos from the 5S over the 5, and that's important. The 5S really didn't do anything too special with the camera, but for the time it was more than good enough of an upgrade, and you could get some killer shots with it. The iPhone 5S's camera was forward-thinking, and it's even passable today. I think it's pretty crazy we've gotten to the point that even though cameras are improving, a 5-year-old smartphone camera honestly takes fine photos. That's pretty crazy.
iOS 7 is the biggest change to iOS since the introduction of iPhone. It's packed with amazing new features and a stunning new user interface.
The next big deal wasn't even directly related to the iPhone 5S, being iOS 7. I won't go too much into iOS 7's impact as I'm more focused on the 5S's hardware, but it still thrust Apple into a more modern look and feel that was lacking with iOS 6 and below. iOS 7's general design is still alive today and has evolved into iOS 12. Things look a little bit different, but if you start using iOS 7 in 2018, it really doesn't feel too out of place, especially compared to the preceding software. iOS 7 was forward-thinking.
It comes in 3 metal finishes: silver, gold, and a new space gray.
Another new thing that was considered to be a big deal at the time was the gold color. I know, but that was thought to be pretty crazy back in the day because Apple had never had any colors other than black and white. Gold was something new, and so people naturally gravitated towards it. I'd imagine that it only helped with sales, as there was something now unique that people wanted, as no other iPhone had ever had this. And funnily enough, if you look today, the newest iPhone has the same colors as the 5S. The XS comes in white, black, and gold. Sound familiar? As silly and seemingly unnecessary as it was, the color was actually forward-thinking, at least from a marketing and business standpoint.
Now customers want great performance that fits in the palm of your hands and you can take with you everywhere. And the iPhone 5S is a huge leap forward in mobile computing performance.
And those were some of the most talked about features. What they all have in common is that they're surface level changes that serve to keep people interested. But where things really changed and innovated was under the hood, with the then all new A7 chipset that had a 64-bit architecture as opposed to 32. This may not mean much to you, and that's fine because it's complicated and I won't really get into what the differences are. But what's important is that a 64-bit processor in a smartphone was practically unheard of at the time, and Apple did it. This pushed Android manufacturers into overdrive in an attempt to match it, and eventually they did, but Apple still beat them to it, and the 5S has prospered greatly because of it. I don't think anyone was really expecting Apple to get there so soon compared to everybody else. Mix the A7 chipset with the then more than solid 1GB of RAM, and the 5S was a beast, and has felt fast for the vast majority of its life cycle, all the way to today on iOS 12. The iPhone 5S is the only smartphone ever to have 5 full years of support, and that's an accomplishment that really can't be understated. This precedent that Apple has set will probably never be beat by anybody else. But let's take a quick look on the Android side, because just because the iPhone 5S is the best when it comes to support doesn't mean Android isn't respectable. Well, unfortunately, they aren't respectable when it comes to support. Let's look at Android P, that was just released in August. What about Google's phone line? What's the oldest device supported? Well, the oldest device is the Pixel, and fair enough, it got it right away in August, so that's pretty cool. The Pixel came out in 2016, but the Nexus 6P, the phone released before in 2015, isn't getting Android P. The fact that Apple is so far ahead when it comes to support is in thanks in part to how well the 5S's hardware has aged. That 64-bit architecture makes all the difference and has allowed it to flourish against even modern smartphones. The iPhone 5 for the time was a beast, but because of its 32-bit chipset, it got left back on iOS 10, which was probably for the best. But the 5S was able to push past 11 and get to 12, which is even better because iOS 12 is an update focused on improving older devices, and it actually does this really well, and you would know if you've used iOS 12 on an older device. The hardware inside of the 5S was forward thinking. I'm not even hardly mentioning a few other things like the M7 Motion coprocessor, because as nice as these improvements were, they pale in comparison to the power put out by the A7. That really was a game changer. It was and still is super powerful and has resulted in a phone that refuses to die. At least until next year, late 2019. Unfortunately, it is extremely likely Apple will kill support for the 5S with iOS 13, as they really have no reason to keep it supported. The hardware is getting old, but you gotta think from a business standpoint too. As consumer friendly as Apple is for keeping their users up to date on their phones, they need to think about business, and it really doesn't make sense for them to keep their phones updated for so long because their users won't buy new phones if they don't have to. By updating the 5S, you're gonna get a big wave of people who stick with their 5S instead of buying a new iPhone. Now, I do think longevity is part of the appeal of buying an iPhone in the first place, and that support will gradually keep getting longer and longer, if I had to guess. For example, the 6S made a big jump in performance over the 6, so it probably will get an extra year of support, but Apple still wants you to buy something new eventually, and understandably so. Now, this is mostly speculation, but the fact is, even disregarding this, the iPhone 5S is getting old. It does only have 1GB of RAM, and well, it's 2013 hardware. Plus, it's rumored that iOS 13 will be a redesign, which means it'll be harder for phones to run, and it would make sense for Apple to retire the 5S so it doesn't slow down greatly. I'm actually a little worried about the iPhone 6, to be honest, as I think Apple will want to keep supporting it despite it really not being much faster than the 5S. I guess time will tell what happens here. The iPhone 5S was forward thinking, through mostly subtle innovations that went farther past Touch ID and a software redesign. The iPhone 5S may just be the best iPhone ever, considering what it brought to the table and how long it's lasted, although there are good arguments for other iPhones as well, such as the iPhone 5, and I think that's where I'm going to end this video today. I've been planning this one for a while now, and I really just want to talk about how insanely awesome the 5S has been throughout the entirety of its life. Apple nailed this phone on the head back in the day, and it's nice to see people still using it over 5 years later. If you enjoyed this video, maybe hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content just like this. You can always follow me over on Twitter and Instagram if you so desire, links down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, I really do appreciate it. That all being said, I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.